Good morning or afternoon, everyone. I'm Hank Hauser from QT, Curriculum and Learning Designer. Welcome to this first TELedvisors webinar of 2019. Very exciting. There's going to be quite a few to follow. But this one, we thought for the start, we will look at the future. And so this webinar is about the future of technology enhanced learning. So there's a few questions there, and we've got a range of presenters there. So there's Sarah Thorneycroft, Kate Mitchell, Marlene Daicopoulos, then and Tom Worthington to cap it off. Okay, Tom, are you ready to go?
Okay, I've got the microphone on. Is it working?
It is working.
Yes. I'll turn up the birdie.
Excellent.
Right. So just a brief introduction. Tom Worthington is an independent educational technology consultant in both higher education and vocational education. Many of you will know Tom because he's very active in this network. So I will leave it at that. And over to you, Tom.
Okay, well, I had a few points answering each of the questions. So I've got essentially 5 slides. Do I have control of the slides, or can you go to the next slide? Oh, very good.
The arrow, Tom, just below the frame, there's an arrow.
Yeah,
can you see the arrow?
No, you do have control, Tom. Sorry.
That's all right. We'll use voice control. Late last year, I went to the IEEE Engineering Education Conference in Wollongong, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I went to deliver a paper, but they were running workshops. So I enrolled in one on how to build a tutor chatbot. And a delightful team from Hong Kong sat us down at computers, and we hooked up with IBM Watson, and we started training it how to answer routine student questions like, when are the classes, that sort of thing. I found this with, 2 hours introduction, looked like it could be quite usable for answering routine student questions that drive you mad. More recently, I've been trying out text-to-voice for student notes, where you run it through, put the text of the notes, and it produces a reasonable synthetic Australian accent voice. And I'm just thinking in the next few years, we should be able to link these up so students could click on their phone or their Star Trek comm badge and get answers to routine questions. When's the assignment due? Do I have to do this? What room is this in? And that might save a lot of mucking about. There's a link in the chat forum to my notes about using the text-based Tutor-bot and all the tools used. If we can move on to the next slide, since we're in a hurry. Oh, isn't voice operation wonderful? I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is the human element. So I've been spending 10 years teaching online with students, mostly in Canberra, but some around the world, using tech. But a few weeks ago, the ANU built me a shiny new teaching building, which is essentially an IKEA flat pack bookcase scaled up. The building's made of wood. It was delivered on a truck, and it was bolted together, and it's now 6 stories high, all flat floors, all rectangular rooms, all the desks are on wheels to suit 6 students, and there are screens all over the place. There's a few teething problems with things, but that can be easily fixed because you can just screw things to the wall and cut holes in the building. The interesting point is getting the tech blended with the face-to-face forums, and I'm running some workshops this semester with 80 international students where I have to teach them to write a job application, and I've got them stuff to read, podcasts, videos to do, quizzes online, forum online, and then we're going to get them into the room in groups of 6 and get them to discuss and help each other. And I'm just waiting to see how well that works and whether they turn up. But I think we'll still have classrooms in the future, but I think the tech won't be that obvious. They'll just be rooms, whiteboards and things, and the tech will be invisible. Next slide, please. I'm a VR skeptic. This is a photo of me wearing a Microsoft HoloLens, which I tried out at LinkedIn's office in Sydney. We have the Silicon Kid in Canberra, who's a highly distinguished tech educator at the Canberra Grammar School. He gets his Code Cadet students to program these gadgets for education, and they've all been to Microsoft to show the executives what they've done. But I still think this is a bit of a niche application. I like the AR, where you overlay the virtual thing on a real room, better than the VR, where you're isolated in a virtual environment. With the AR, you could have a group of people working together on a virtual object. I just find the VR so claustrophobic in comparison, where you're all just in your little world. But I still see this as just ancillary, where there are physical objects you want to interact with in a virtual way. But I've actually tried these things out. The Microsoft one's the closest to being a useful gadget that I've found so far in about 5 years of trying them out. Last slide, please. Micro-credentials. Last year, I read this announcement saying the New Zealand Qualifications Authority had recognised micro-credentials, and I'm just waiting to see what's happened. So the idea is a short course of a few weeks can get official approval under the National Certification Scheme. I bump into people running around the ANU campus. I bumped into one yesterday, all excited about doing micro-credentials, and I said, you realise they're not legal. They're not proper qualifications. When you get a certificate, it says at the bottom, this certificate is not under the EQF, in which case this certificate is not a real qualification. So I think we could have exciting things where what I want to do is figure a way to build micro-credentials so they build up into real credentials, cross the boundary between vocational education and university education. And yes, there's a comment there about so worthless. Yes. So if it's not a qualification recognised for, I can't go to a certifier and say I want to enter this workplace, and here is my qualification. If it isn't officially recognised, they'll just say that's worthless, go away. So that's the exciting thing for me. How do you link those up and cross the boundary between vocational, where they have recognition of prior learning, they have short elements, but they still don't have micro-credentials, and the university system? And I think I'll leave it there and ask for questions.
Great, thanks, Tom. Yes, there are definitely a few comments in there, and there's a few questions as well. There's some comments about one by Alison that says people don't want to wear things on their heads, and she says that it's been around for a while. Do you want to respond to
yes. that? Yes. The VR headsets are not new. I found this stereoscopic photograph of a young lady in a Victorian parlour holding a stereoscope up, and you could purchase a case full of educational stereoscopic slides for educating young ladies at home. And this was like 19th century VR, and it looked very much like the modern VR headsets, except the clothing she was wearing was quite old-fashioned. And in some way, this is one of these technologies that's been coming for a long time. It hasn't got here. When we can have it without a headset, it would be much better. But even the Microsoft HoloLens I thought was a great improvement, but it's still quite a bulky thing. Have you got another question?
Hang on. Can the future involve something that doesn't involve or majorly reimagines the LMS, or are we beyond that point? That's Kate's question.
I guess I would like a lightweight LMS which would just look after all the administrative stuff about what the student has to do, have they done it yet, and so on, and then have all the content and the activity by the student out in forums, social media, or wherever. And then the LMS would just sort of give the official stamp of approval, and it might, you know, put a blockchain credential out or something like that. So I think that's theoretically possible. And I use Moodle, but I don't use most of the Moodle features because there's too many and they're too complicated and the students can't understand it. And often in Moodle, all I have is, here is the task, go somewhere else and do it with some other tool and come back with the evidence that you've done it, and you'll get your tick of approval. Especially in computer science here, we use lots and lots of project management tools and development tools which are outside the LMS. Have we got time for more questions?
I think we've actually run out of time. There's only there's 1 minute left, and I do want to take this opportunity to thank all the presenters for today. So Sarah, Kate, Marlene, and Tom, thanks very much. Just as a final comment, it's interesting that at the very end of Kate's blog post the other day, it says that instructional coordinators, which probably best describes many of our roles, only clocks up a 0.4% chance of being roboticized. So that's something positive to take away from today's session. I thank you all again. And yeah, the other thing I wanted to say though is that this is quite a large group of people. So we are always looking for people to present stuff they're working on or present their own practice. So yeah, and it's a non-threatening environment. So please feel free to let us know about anything you would like to present on potentially in the future. That would be great. So thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.